If you've ever wondered whether a simple repair job could change to lives forever, stick around because this story will remind you that sometimes the most broken things aren't the ones we're hired to fix. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Marcus, and I'm 28 years old, though most days I feel like I've lived twice that. I'm what you'd call a jack-of-all-trades repair guy, person folks call when their dishwasher decides to flood the kitchen at midnight, or when their air conditioner gives up during the hottest week of summer. I've been fixing things since I was 12, starting with my grandmother's old radio that crackled more than it played music. There's something deeply satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. About restoring order to chaos with nothing but your hands and a little know-how. I drive a beat-up Honda Civic that's seen better decades. Its trunk permanently stuffed with toolboxes, spare parts, and enough duct tape to hold together a small aircraft. The car might not look like much, but it's reliable, just like me. At least that's what I tell my customers. In reality, some days I feel like I'm held together with duct tape too, trying to figure out my own life one repair job at a time. I live in Riverside, a mid-sized town in Ohio, where everyone knows everyone else's business. The local diner serves coffee, strong enough to wake the dead. It's the kind of place where people still wave at strangers and wear a broken appliance. It becomes neighborhood news. The houses here are mostly from the 70s and 80s, with big front yards and that lived-in charm that comes from decades of family memories soaked into the walls. This particular Tuesday started like any other. I was sitting in my small apartment above Mrs. Chin's bakery, the smell of fresh bread drifting up through the floorboards, when my phone buzzed with a text from a new customer. The message was simple. "Hi. My microwave stopped working yesterday. Are you available today? It's Alina. I got your number from my neighbor Janet." I knew Janet well. She was one of my regular customers, who seemed to have a new appliance crisis every other month. Bless her heart. I texted back that I could be there by 10, grabbed my toolbox, and headed out into the crisp morning air. Riverside looked particularly beautiful that day, with autumn leaves scattered across the sidewalks like nature's confetti. I always loved this time of year, when the world seemed to be taking a deep breath before winter settled in. The address led me to Maple Street, a quiet residential area where the houses sat comfortably apart from each other, each with its own personality. Elena's house was a modest two-story colonial painted in soft blue with white trim, the kind of home that looked like it had been well-loved, but perhaps neglected in recent years. The front garden showed signs of someone who cared, but maybe didn't have the energy to keep up with everything. There were roses that needed pruning and a small root. Herb garden that had seen better days. I parked in the driveway and grabbed my toolbox, noting the way the morning sun caught the windows just right, making the whole house seem to glow with a quiet warmth. I walked up the front steps. I could hear classical music playing softly. From inside, something elegant and melancholy that seemed to match the atmosphere of the place perfectly. I knocked on the front door, and after a moment, it was opened to reveal a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s with shoulder length, auburn hair that caught the light beautifully. She was wearing a simple gray sweater and jeans, but there was something about the way she carried herself that spoke of someone who had once been very confident but had somehow lost that spark along the way. Her eyes were a striking green, but they held a sadness that made me want to immediately reassure her that whatever was broken, I could fix it. "You must be Marcus," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach those green eyes. "I'm Alina. Thank you so much for coming out on such short notice." "No problem at all," I replied, returning her smile with what I hoped was an encouraging one. "Microwave troubles can really throw off your whole day. Let's take a look and see what we're dealing with." She led me through a living room that was tastefully decorated but had that slightly empty feeling of a house where someone lived alone. There were family photos on the mantelpiece, but they looked dated, as if no new memories had been added in quite some time. The kitchen was spacious and bright, with windows that looked out onto a backyard, where a tire swing hung motionless. From an old oak tree, the microwave in question was a mid-range model, probably about 5 years old, sitting on the counter looking perfectly innocent despite its apparent rebellion. Alina stood nearby, wrapping her arms around herself in a gesture that seemed more about comfort than temperature. It just stopped working yesterday evening, she explained, her voice carrying that particular frustration that comes with modern appliances. I was trying to heat up some leftover soup, pressed the buttons like always, but nothing happened. No lights, no sounds, nothing at all. I nodded, already running through the most common causes in my head. Let's start with the basics, said, unplugging the unit and then plugging it back in. Nothing. Sometimes it's just a power issue, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. As I began examining the microwave more closely, Alina hovered nearby, and I could sense her watching my every move. There was something almost desperate in her attention, as if this broken appliance represented something much larger in her life. I'd seen this before with customers who lived alone, where a non-functioning appliance became a symbol of everything falling apart. "How long have you lived here?" I asked, trying to make conversation while I worked. "About 8 years now," she replied, and I caught something wistful in her tone. "I moved in after my divorce was finalized. It was supposed to be a fresh start, you know? A place where I could rebuild and figure out who I was supposed to be." I looked up from the microwave, struck by the honesty in her voice. "And how's that going?" I asked gently. She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that held more sadness than humor. "Some days better than others. Today feels like one of the harder ones, to be honest. It's funny how something as simple as a broken microwave can make you feel so helpless." I understood that feeling completely. "I know exactly what you mean," I said, returning my attention to the appliance. "Sometimes it's not really about the thing that's broken. It's about feeling like you can't control anything in your life." She looked at me with surprise, as if she hadn't expected such understanding from a repair guy. "Exactly," she said softly. "You get it?" As I continued working, removing the outer casing to get a better look at the internal components. Alina began talking more freely. She told me about her job as a freelance graphic designer, how she worked mostly from home and sometimes went days without talking to another person. She mentioned her teenage daughter who lived with her ex-husband in another state and only visited during school breaks. The loneliness in her voice was palpable, and I found myself working slower than usual, not wanting to rush through what might be her only real conversation of the week. "The thing is," she continued, leaning against the kitchen island, "I used to feel so confident, so sure of myself. I had this whole life planned out, you know? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now back to the story. Marriage, family, career, the whole package. Then everything fell apart, and I realized I had no idea who I was without all of that. I paused in my work, looking at her with genuine empathy. "Divorce can be brutal," I said. "My parents went through one when I was in college. Even as an adult watching from the outside, I could see how it shattered their sense of themselves." She nodded appreciatively. "It's like you lose your identity along with everything else. I look in the mirror some days and don't recognize the person staring back at me. When did I become this person who's afraid of everything, who second guesses every decision, who feels invisible most of the time?" Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with pain and frustration. I could see this was about so much more than a broken microwave, and I felt honored that she was sharing something so personal with a stranger. As I continued examining the appliance, I discovered what appeared to be a blown fuse in the control panel, a relatively simple fix that would have the microwave working again within the hour. But something told me that Alina needed more than just a functioning appliance today. She needed to feel heard, to feel seen, to remember that she mattered. And maybe, just maybe, I was exactly where I was supposed to be, at exactly the right time. I was carefully examining the blown fuse when Alina suddenly went quiet. The comfortable conversation we'd been having came to an abrupt halt, and when I looked up, I saw her staring at her reflection in the kitchen window. Her expression had changed completely, becoming distant and melancholy in a way that made my chest tighten with concern. "You know what's funny?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I spent so much time today getting ready for you to come over. I put on makeup for the first time in weeks, picked out this sweater because it used to be my favorite, even styled my hair a little, all for a repair guy I've never met. I set down my screwdriver, sensing that something important was about to happen. That doesn't sound funny to me, I said gently. It sounds like you care about yourself. She turned away from the window and looked directly at me, her green eyes filled with a vulnerability that took my breath away. Marcus, can I ask you something? I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, I replied, though something in her tone made my heart rate quicken. Lena took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for what she was about to say. I'm 46 years old, and I haven't felt beautiful in years. Most days I feel completely invisible, like I could disappear and no one would even notice. When you look at me, really look at me, do you see me? Do you see someone worth seeing?
What?
The question hit me like a physical blow. The raw honesty, the desperate need in her voice, the way she stood there waiting for my answer as if her entire self-worth hung in the balance. I'd never had a customer ask me anything like that before. Never had someone lay their heart so bare in front of a virtual stranger. I stood up slowly, wiping my hands on a rag, trying to process what had just happened. Alina was watching my face intently, and I could see fear creeping into her expression, as if she was already regretting her boldness. Lena, I began, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. That's not a question I was expecting. Her face flushed red, and she immediately looked away. I'm sorry, that was completely inappropriate. I don't know what came over me. Please just forget I said anything and focus on the microwave. But I couldn't forget it. The pain in her voice, the courage it must have taken to ask such a vulnerable question. The way she was now wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to disappear. No, don't apologize, I said firmly. That took incredible bravery to say. She looked back at me, surprised by my response. Bravery? It was mortifying. It was honest, I corrected. And yes, Alina, I see you. Been seeing you since. The moment you opened that door. Her eyes widened, and I could see tears beginning to form. You're just being kind because you feel sorry for me. I'm being truthful because you deserve the truth, I said, taking a step closer. You want me to tell you what I see? I see a woman who's been through hell, but still has the strength to get up every morning. I see someone who cares enough about herself to put on makeup for a stranger. Someone who keeps fresh flowers on her kitchen table, even when she lives alone. I see beautiful green eyes that light up when you talk about your work, and a smile that could brighten anyone's day, if you'd let it. Elena's hand flew to her mouth, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. You really mean that? Every word, I said without hesitation. But more importantly, the question isn't whether I see you.
The question is whether you see yourself.
Before she could respond, the front door burst open, and a teenage girl with Elena's same auburn hair came barreling into the kitchen. Mom, I'm home early from Dad's because he had to travel for work and I missed you and wanted to surprise. You, and who is this? The girl stopped short when she saw me standing there with my toolbox, then noticed her mother's tear-streaked face. Oh no, did something bad happen? Is the house falling apart? Are we broke? Alina quickly wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. No, sweetie, nothing's wrong. This is Marcus. He's here to fix the microwave. Marcus, this is my daughter. Sophia. Sophia looked between us suspiciously, clearly sensing there was more to the story. She was about 16 with her mother's striking features, but none of the sadness. Instead, she radiated teenage confidence and protectiveness. Mom's been really sad lately, Sophia announced bluntly, making Elena's face turn red again. She thinks I don't notice, but I do. She pretends everything's fine when we video chat, but I can tell she's lonely. Sophia, Elena protested, mortified. But Sophia wasn't done. She turned to me with the directness that only teenagers possess. Are you single? 'Cause my mom is amazing, and anyone who can't see that is an idiot? I couldn't help but laugh at her boldness. Your mom raised you well, I said. She should be proud. I am proud, Alina said softly, looking at her daughter with such love that it made my heart ache. But you can't just interrogate the repairman, honey. Why not? Sophia shrugged. He seems nice and you were crying, which means either something really good or really bad just happened. Given that you're both blushing, I'm guessing it was good.
How?
Just then the doorbell rang, and Alina looked confused. I'm not expecting anyone else. Sophia perked up. Well, that's probably Mrs. Patterson from next door. I saw her peeking through her curtains when I got dropped off. She's super nosy, but also really sweet. Sure enough, when Alina opened the door, a woman in her 70s stood there holding a covered dish and wearing the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly what was going on. "Hello, dear," Mrs. Patterson said cheerfully. "I brought you some of my famous casserole and thought I'd check on you. I noticed you had a repair truck in the driveway and wanted to make sure everything was all right." Her eyes immediately found me in the kitchen and lit up with interest. "Everything's fine, Mrs. Patterson," Alina said, though her voice still carried traces of emotion. "This is Marcus. He's fixing my microwave." Mrs. Patterson bustled into the kitchen, set down her casserole, and looked me up and down appraisingly. "Well, aren't you a handsome young man?" "Alina, you didn't tell me your repair person was so lovely." Alina's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Mrs. Patterson, please." But the older woman was just getting started. You know, Alina is the sweetest girl on this whole street. Always helping everyone out, never asks for anything in return. She made me the most beautiful business cards when I started my little Etsy shop. Wouldn't take a penny for them. "Mom's really talented," Sophia chimed in, clearly enjoying her mother's embarrassment. "She designed the logo for the coffee shop downtown, too." I looked at Alina with renewed respect. "You didn't mention you were so involved in the community." "It's nothing," Alina said dismissively. "Just small projects here and there." "Nothing?" Mrs. Patterson scoffed. "Dear, you single-handedly designed all the promotional materials for the fall festival. The whole event was a success because of your work." Sophia nodded enthusiastically. She's always doing stuff for people. Dad used to say she cared more about everyone else than herself. The comment hung in the air awkwardly, and I could see Elena's confidence deflating again. Mrs. Patterson, however, was having none of it. "Your father was a fool, sweetheart," she said bluntly. "Any man who can't appreciate a woman like you doesn't deserve you. Isn't that right, Marcus?" All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of the moment. Alina was looking at me with a mixture of hope and terror, clearly afraid of what I might say, but desperate to hear it anyway. "I think," I said carefully, "that Alina is lucky to have people in her life who see her value, even when she struggles to see it herself." Mrs. Patterson beamed approvingly. "Exactly right. You seem like a smart young man. Could we please talk about something else?" Alina pleaded, though I noticed she was smiling despite her embarrassment. "Actually," I said, returning to the microwave, "I should probably get back to work. I found the problem, and it's an easy fix. I just need to replace this fuse and you'll be good as new." As I worked, the kitchen filled with the comfortable chatter of 3 generations of women. Sophia regaled us with stories from her time at her father's house. Mrs. Patterson shared neighborhood gossip, and Alina gradually relaxed, her laughter becoming more genuine with each passing minute. I found myself working slower than necessary. Not wanting to end this unexpected gathering, there was something magical about watching Alina surrounded by people who clearly cared about her. Seeing her realize that she wasn't as alone as she thought. "You know," Mrs. Patterson said at one point, "we should have a dinner party soon. Alina, you could cook that wonderful pasta dish you made for the block party, and Marcus, you should join us." "Oh, I couldn't impose," I started to protest. "Nonsense," Sophia interrupted. "Mom's an amazing cook, and she never has anyone to cook for anymore. Besides, you seem cool for an adult." Alina looked at me hopefully. "You really don't have to, but if you'd like to, you're more than welcome." The microwave suddenly hummed to life, signaling that my repair was complete. But somehow, that felt like the least important thing happening in the room. I looked around at these 3 women who had inadvertently shown me something beautiful. About human connection. About how quickly strangers can become something more when hearts are open and honest. "I'd love to," I said, and meant it completely. Lena's smile in that moment was radiant, transforming her entire face and making me understand exactly what she meant about feeling beautiful. She was beautiful, inside and out, and I was grateful that circumstances had brought me here to witness it. As Mrs. Patterson and Sophia continued planning our impromptu dinner party, I realized that what had started as a simple repair job was becoming something much more significant. Elena's vulnerable question still echoed in my mind, along with my honest answer. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The dinner party was scheduled for Friday evening, which gave me 3 days to question every decision I'd made in that kitchen. What had I been thinking, accepting an invitation from a customer? This wasn't how I usually conducted business. But then again, nothing about Elena felt usual. I found myself thinking about her question at the strangest moments. While fixing Mrs. Rodriguez's garbage disposal on Wednesday, or replacing light fixtures for the Thompson family on Thursday, Friday arrived with an unseasonably warm evening for October, and I stood outside Elena's house at exactly 6 o'clock, holding a bottle of wine and second-guessing everything. I'd changed clothes 3 times, settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt that my sister had bought me last Christmas, claiming it brought out my eyes. I hadn't worn it since. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal Sophia grinning at me. "Mom's been nervous all day," she announced without preamble. "She changed her outfit like 5 times and keeps checking her hair in every mirror." "Sophia," Elena's voice called from somewhere inside the house. "Let the poor man in before you scare him away." I stepped into the living room and the smell that hit me was incredible. Something rich and savory with herbs I couldn't identify, mixed with the scent of fresh bread. Elena appeared from the kitchen wearing a deep blue dress that made her eyes look like emeralds, and I momentarily forgot how to form words. "You look beautiful," I said, then immediately worried I'd overstepped. But Elena's face lit up with a smile that could have powered the entire neighborhood. "Thank you," she said softly. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Mrs. Patterson arrived. Mrs. Patterson arrived moments later, bustling through the door with another covered dish and enough energy to fuel. Small city. "Marcus, dear, you look handsome as ever. Lena, this house smells divine. Sophia, help me with this dessert before I drop it." The evening unfolded with an ease that surprised me. Elena had prepared homemade ravioli with a sauce that tasted like it had been simmering for hours, accompanied by a salad from her garden and bread that was still warm from the oven. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine, touching on everything from Sophia's school projects to Mrs. Patterson's late husband's military service. I found myself sharing stories I rarely told anyone about growing up with a single mother. After my father left, about learning to fix things out of necessity because we couldn't afford repair services. Elena listened with the kind of attention that made you feel like the most interesting person in the world, asking thoughtful questions and sharing her own experiences with unexpected honesty. "I used to think being alone meant being lonely," she said during a lull in conversation. "But lately, I'm learning there's a difference. Being alone can be peaceful if you're comfortable with yourself." "Are you?" I asked. "Comfortable with yourself?" She considered the question seriously. "I'm working on it. Some days are better than others." Sophia, who had been unusually quiet for a teenager, suddenly spoke up. "Mom, remember when you used to sing while you cooked? You haven't done that in forever?" Elena's cheeks flushed. "I don't really sing anymore, honey." "You should," Mrs. Patterson chimed in. "You have such a lovely voice. Remember when you sang at the community center fundraiser?" "That was different," Elena protested. "That was before what?" I asked gently. Elena hesitated, then sighed. "Before David left. Before I started questioning everything about myself. He used to say my singing was nice, but not professional quality. Eventually, I just stopped." The table went quiet, and I felt a familiar anger rise in my chest. I'd heard variations of this story too many times from too many women who'd been convinced they weren't enough by men who didn't deserve them. "Would you sing for us now?" I asked impulsively. Elena's eyes widened. "Oh no, I couldn't. Please, Mom," Sophia added. "Just something small." Mrs. Patterson nodded encouragingly. "We're family here, dear. No judgment. Only love." Elena looked around the table at our expectant faces, and I could see her internal struggle. Finally, she took a deep breath and began to hum something soft and melodic. The humming gradually became words, a gentle song about hope and new beginnings. That seemed to fill the entire house with warmth. Her voice was beautiful, clear, and rich with emotion, and I found myself completely captivated. This was the Elena that had existed before life wore her down, confident and radiant and utterly mesmerizing. When she finished, the silence that followed was reverent. That was incredible, I said, meaning every word. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears this time. I'd forgotten how good it felt. Never stop again, Sophia said firmly. Promise me. I promise, Elena whispered, and I could see something shift in her expression, a small piece of herself being reclaimed. After dinner, Mrs. Patterson excused herself to check on her cat, and Sophia disappeared upstairs to video chat with friends, leaving Elena and me alone in the kitchen. We worked together to clear the dishes, moving around each other with surprising synchronization. Thank you, Elena said as I helped her load the dishwasher. For tonight, for listening, for seeing me. I can't remember the last time I felt this. Much like myself. Thank you for letting me be part of it, I replied. This was exactly what I didn't know I needed. She turned to face me, and we were suddenly standing very close in the small kitchen space. Marcus, can I ask you something? Else? Anything? What are you running from? The question caught me completely off guard. What do you mean? You're 28, talented, kind, and you work alone, fixing other people's problems? You talk about your family like you love them, but don't see them often? You accepted a dinner invitation from a virtual stranger? So what are you running from? I leaned against the counter, considering her question. No one had ever asked me that so directly before. Commitment, I guess. Settling down, becoming my father. What was wrong with your father? He left, I said simply. Note. Hard. When my mom got sick, when life became about more than just himself, he disappeared. I've spent my whole adult life afraid I'll do the same thing to someone. Elena nodded thoughtfully. So you keep moving. Keep your relationship surface level. Never let anyone get close enough to be hurt when you leave. Something like that? I looked at her curiously. How did you know? Because I've been doing the same thing, just from the opposite direction. I've been hiding so well that no one can find me to leave me. We stood there in the kitchen, two people who'd been protecting themselves in different ways from the same fear. And I felt something shift between us. An understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits who'd been carrying similar wounds. The moment was interrupted by Sophia bounding back downstairs. Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you have any more of that casserole from last week. Apparently, her nephew is visiting tomorrow, and she wants to impress him. Lena laughed. The spell broken, but not forgotten. Tell her I'll bring some over in the morning. As the evening wound down, I found myself reluctant to leave. The warmth of Elena's home, the easy conversation, the sense of belonging somewhere, it was intoxicating. But eventually, Mrs. Patterson returned to collect her empty dishes, and I knew it was time to go. Walk me out? Elena asked softly. We stepped onto the front porch, and the night air was crisp and clear, full of stars that seemed brighter than usual. Elena wrapped her arms around herself, and I fought the urge to offer her my jacket. I meant what I said earlier, she told me, about feeling like myself again. I haven't felt that way in so long, I'd almost forgotten it was possible. You deserve to feel that way every day, I replied. So do you, she said, looking at me meaningfully. You know, my kitchen faucet has been dripping lately. Nothing urgent, but if you're not too busy. I smiled, understanding the subtext. I think I could fit that into my schedule. Good, she said, smiling back, because I don't think I'm done being seen by you yet. As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about Elena's question about what I was running from. For the first time in years, I found myself wondering what I might be running toward instead. The thought should have terrified me, but instead it filled me with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The next morning I woke up thinking about Elena's voice filling her kitchen, about the way she'd looked when she remembered who she used to be. I realized that in helping her see herself clearly, she'd somehow helped me see myself too. Maybe we were both ready to stop running, to stop hiding, to start building something real, instead of just fixing what was broken. I picked up my phone and sent her a text. How's that faucet doing? I could stop by this afternoon if you'd like. Her response came back almost immediately. It's gotten much worse overnight. It definitely needs immediate attention. I laughed out loud, knowing full well that kitchen faucets don't deteriorate that quickly. But I also knew that some things that appear broken are really just waiting for the right person to see their true value, and in some connections are worth the risk of being hurt, worth the chance of something beautiful and lasting. For the first time in my adult life, I was ready to find out what that might look like. I arrived at Elena's house Saturday afternoon with my toolbox and what I told myself was professional enthusiasm. Though the butterflies in my stomach suggested otherwise, the supposedly urgent faucet repair had become my excuse to see her again, and we both knew it. What I didn't expect was to find Elena's ex-husband's car in the driveway. Through the front window, I could see Elena in what appeared to be an intense conversation with a tall man in an expensive suit. Even from outside, I could read the tension in her posture, the way she held her arms crossed defensively. My protective instincts kicked in immediately, but I forced myself to knock politely rather than burst through the door like some kind of knight in work boots. Elena answered, and I could see the stress etched across her face. Marcus, hi. So sorry, but this might not be the best time after all. Everything okay? I asked, though it clearly wasn't. The man I assumed was her ex-husband appeared behind her, looking me up and down with obvious disdain. Elena, who is this?
David.
This is Marcus. He's helping me with some repairs around the house. Marcus, this is David, Sophia's father. David extended a hand with the kind of aggressive firmness that men use when they're marking territory. The handyman, right? Elena's always been drawn to fixing broken things. The comment hit its mark, and I saw Elena flinch. Kept my expression neutral, but inside I was seething. Actually, I specialize in maintaining things that work perfectly well. Prevention is usually more effective than repair. David's smile didn't reach his eyes. How philosophical. Elena, we need to finish our conversation privately. I looked at Elena, trying to read what she needed from me. I can come back later. Or I could start on that faucet while you talk. Whatever works better for you. Please stay, she said quickly, then seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, the faucet really does need attention, and you're already here. David's jaw tightened. This is a family matter, Elena. Marcus is welcome in my home any time, Elena replied, her voice gaining strength. And if this is about Sophia, she's upstairs and can hear every word anyway. As if summoned, Sophia appeared on the staircase, looking between her parents with the weary expression of a teenager who'd witnessed too many of these confrontations. Dad, why are you even here? You said you couldn't take me this weekend because of work. Something came up, David said, his tone softening slightly when addressing his daughter. I wanted to discuss some changes with your mother. Elena's face went pale. What kind of changes? The promotion came through, David announced, as if this was good news. We're moving to Seattle. Company's covering all relocation expenses. And Sophia can finish high school at one of the best private schools in the country. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there with my toolbox, feeling like an intruder in a moment that was reshaping Elena's world. Sophia was the first to speak. I don't want to move to Seattle, she said firmly. I want to stay here with Mom. Honey, this is an incredible opportunity, David continued. The school has connections to all the top universities, and the Pacific Northwest has so much to offer culturally. So does Ohio, Sophia shot back. And Mom is here. My friends are here. My life is here. Elena finally found her voice. You can't just decide to uproot her, David. This is her home too. Actually, according to our custody agreement, I can. Make decisions about her education and living situation, David replied coldly. I've already enrolled her for the spring semester. I watched Elena's face crumble, and something protective and fierce rose up in my chest. This man was systematically destroying the confidence she'd been rebuilding, taking away the one person who meant everything to her. Excuse me, I said, setting down my toolbox with perhaps more force than necessary. But Sophia is 16, not 6. Don't courts usually consider the preferences of teenagers in custody matters? David turned to me with obvious irritation. This doesn't concern you. You're right, I said evenly. But I happen to know something about fathers who make unilateral decisions without considering how they affect the people they claim to love. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elena looked at me with surprise and something that might have been gratitude, while Sophia's eyes widened with interest. And you are? David asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Someone who believes that good parents put their children's emotional well-being before their own convenience? I replied. Before David could respond, Mrs. Patterson's voice, called from the back door. Elena, dear, I hope you don't mind. I let myself in through the garden gate. I brought you some.
No.
She stopped short when she saw the tableau in the living room, her experienced eyes immediately assessing the situation. Am I interrupting something important, Mrs. Patterson? This is David, Sophia's father, Elena said weakly. David, this is my neighbor? Mrs. Patterson's smile could have frozen fire. How lovely to finally meet you. Elena has told me so much about you. I doubted that was true, but Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested that whatever she'd heard wasn't particularly flattering. I was just explaining to Elena about our move to Seattle, David said, clearly trying to regain control of the narrative. Oh my, Mrs. Patterson said, settling into Elena's armchair as if she planned to stay. That sounds like quite a change. Sophia, dear, what do you think about leaving all your friends and activities here? I hate it, Sophia said bluntly. Dad thinks he can just decide my entire life without asking what I want. Teenagers don't always know what's best for them, David said defensively. Neither do adults, apparently, Mrs. Patterson replied. Sweetly, Elena, you must be devastated at the thought of Sophia moving so far away. Elena nodded, tears threatening to spill over. Of course I am, but if David thinks it's best for Sophia's education. I think, Mrs. Patterson interrupted gently, that a child's emotional well-being is just as important as their academic opportunities. Wouldn't you agree, David? The older woman's question hung in the air like a challenge. David shifted uncomfortably. Clearly not used to being questioned by anyone, let alone a 70-something neighbor. Naturally, but this is a unique opportunity that may not come again. Unlike daughters, Mrs. Patterson observed, those you only get one chance with. Sophia looked at her grandmother figure with obvious admiration. Mrs. Patterson, would you tell Dad about how Mom has been helping the whole neighborhood? About all the design work she does and how everyone relies on her? Oh yes, Mrs. Patterson said enthusiastically. Elena is absolutely indispensable around here. Last week she designed new promotional materials for the community center that increased event attendance by 30%, and her work on the fall festival was extraordinary. I watched David's expression shift slightly, as if he was seeing Elena for the first time in years. I didn't realize you were still doing design work. I never stopped, Elena said quietly. I've been building my own client base. That's wonderful, honey, but it's not exactly a stable career, David replied. And I saw Elena's newfound confidence begin to waver again. Actually, I interjected, unable to stay silent, Elena's work is incredible. She's got real talent and a growing reputation. Sometimes the most stable career is one you build yourself, doing something you're passionate about. Elena looked at me with surprise and gratitude while David's expression grew increasingly hostile. And you're an expert on career stability? David asked mockingly. I know something about building a business from nothing, I replied calmly. And I know that success isn't just measured by corporate titles or salary figures. Dad, Sophia said suddenly, why do you always do this? Why do you always make Mom feel bad about herself? The question was like a bomb going off in the room. David's face flushed red. Elena looked mortified. Mrs. Patterson watched everything with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen similar dynamics play out many times before. I don't make your mother feel anything, David said defensively. I'm simply being realistic about opportunities and responsibilities. You are making her feel small, Sophia accused, her teenage directness cutting through all the adult politeness. You did it when you were married and you're still doing it now. Why can't you just be happy that she's finally happy again? The room fell silent except for the ticking of Elena's grandmother clock. I could see Elena struggling with whether to defend David or support her daughter, caught between old patterns and new truths. Sophia, Elena said finally, her voice stronger. Then I'd heard it all day. You don't need to protect me anymore? I can speak for myself. She turned to David, and I could see her gathering courage like armor. She's right, David. You do make me feel small. You always have. I've spent 2 years rebuilding the confidence you systematically destroyed. David's mouth fell open, clearly shocked by Elena's directness. Elena, I never meant to. Yes, you did, she interrupted. You meant to keep me uncertain and dependent because it made you feel important, but I'm not that person anymore. The transformation in Elena was remarkable. This was the woman who had sung in her kitchen, who had asked me if I could see her, who had slowly been remembering her own worth. I'm not moving to Seattle, Sophia declared. I'm staying here with Mom. Honey, it's not that simple, David started to say. Actually, it is, Mrs. Patterson chimed in. At 16, Sophia's preferences carry significant weight in any custody modification, especially when one parent is trying to relocate against the child's wishes. David looked around the room, realizing that his easy victory had turned into something much more complicated. Alina, surely you can see that this opportunity— What I can see, Alina said firmly, is that you're asking me to give up my daughter so you can advance your career? Again, just like you asked me to give up my dreams when we were married? The truth of that statement hit David visibly, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain. I think, I said quietly, that maybe Sophia should have some time to think about this without pressure from anyone. And maybe you should consider what's really best for her, not what's most convenient for you. David looked at me with naked hostility, but he couldn't argue with the logic. He turned back to Alina, and I could see him struggling with the realization that he no longer had the power to make her doubt herself. This conversation isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is, Alina replied with quiet strength. The only conversation we need to have is about what makes Sophia happy and secure. Everything else is just noise. As David left, slamming the door behind him, the house seemed to exhale collectively. Sophia immediately went to her mother, wrapping her in a fierce hug. I'm so proud of you, Mom, she whispered. Alina looked at me over her daughter's shoulder, and in her eyes I could see the woman she was becoming, strong and sure and absolutely radiant. The faucet repair could wait. What mattered was that Alina had found her voice, and this time she wasn't going to let anyone convince her to silence it again. No. 3 months later, I was back in Elena's kitchen, but this time I wasn't there to fix anything. The spring afternoon sun streamed through windows that Alina had decorated with hanging plants, casting dancing shadows across walls now adorned with her own artwork. The house felt completely different, alive with color and warmth, and the sound of Alina humming while she cooked. Hand me that spoon, she asked, stirring something that smelled incredible on the stove. I passed it to her, marveling at how natural this had become. We'd fallen into a rhythm over the past few months, me stopping by after work, sometimes with a legitimate repair, but more often just because we both craved each other's company. Alina had blossomed in ways that took my breath away, her confidence growing stronger each day. Sophia's bringing her boyfriend tonight, Alina said with a grin. Fair warning, she's going to interrogate you about your intentions toward her mother. I laughed, remembering the first time Sophia had asked me point blank if I was going to hurt her mom. The kid didn't pull punches. What should I tell her? Alina turned from the stove, her green eyes sparkling with mischief. That depends. What are your intentions? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang, followed immediately by Mrs. Patterson's voice calling out, "It's just me, dears." Our elderly neighbor had become a regular fixture at these dinners, appointing herself as our unofficial chaperone and biggest supporter. She bustled in carrying a pie that smelled like heaven and wearing a smile that suggested she knew exactly what she'd interrupted. Don't mind me, she said cheerfully, setting the pie on the counter. I was just telling Harold from down the street about you two, and he wanted to know when we're having the engagement party. Mrs. Patterson, Lena protested, her cheeks turning pink. What? It's a perfectly reasonable question. You've been practically glowing for months. Marcus looks at you like you hung the moon. And everyone in the neighborhood is placing bets on when he's going to propose. I felt my own face heating up. People are betting on us? Oh yes, dear. I've got $5 on Valentine's Day, but Janet thinks you're more of a surprise romantic and will do it sooner. Alina buried her face in her hands, but I could see her smiling. I can't believe you're all gambling on my love life. It's not gambling when it's a sure thing, Mrs. Patterson said, matter-of-factly. Anyone with eyes can see how happy you to make each other. The front door opened again, and Sophia's voice rang out, "Mom, we're here." And I can smell Mrs. Patterson's pie from the driveway. Souffle appeared in the kitchen, followed by a tall, lanky boy who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Everyone, this is Tyler. Tyler, this is my mom, Alina, our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, and Marcus, who's basically family now. Tyler managed a nervous wave while Sophia beamed at having successfully delivered her boyfriend into what she clearly considered friendly territory. Tyler plays guitar, Sophia announced. Mom, you should sing something while he plays. Oh, I don't know. Alina started to protest, but Tyler's face lit up with interest. You sing? That's awesome. I brought my guitar just in case. Sophia said you might want to hear some music. I watched Alina consider it, seeing the internal debate play out across her face. The Alina from a few months ago would have deflected and changed the subject. But this Alina, the one who'd found her voice again, nodded slowly. Maybe just one song, she said. Tyler retrieved his guitar from the living room, and after a brief conversation, he settled on a song I didn't recognize, but that seemed to resonate with Alina. As the first notes filled the kitchen, Alina's voice joined in, clear and strong and absolutely beautiful. This time, I wasn't the only one captivated. Sophia watched her mother with obvious pride. Mrs. Patterson had tears in her eyes, and even Tyler seemed awed by Elena's talent. But what struck me most was Elena herself, completely at ease, lost in the music and radiating the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are. When the song ended, the kitchen erupted in applause. Elena laughed, her face glowing with joy and accomplishment. Mom, you need to record that, Sophia said seriously, like professionally. She's right, Tyler added. You have real talent. My music teacher is always looking for vocalists to work with students. You should totally consider it. Lena looked around at all of us, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. You really think so? I think I said quietly that you should do whatever makes you feel as alive as you look right now. Our eyes met across the kitchen, and in that moment, I knew Mrs. Patterson was right about one thing. This was a sure thing. What Alina and I had built together wasn't just romance, it was partnership, mutual support, and the kind of love that made both people better versions of themselves. Dinner was a chaotic, joyful affair with everyone talking over each other. Tyler gradually relaxing enough to share stories about his band, and Mrs. Patterson regaling us with neighborhood gossip that was somehow both scandalous and heartwarming. As the evening wound down and our guests prepared to leave, Sophia pulled me aside in the hallway. Marcus, she said seriously, I need to ask you something. Here it comes, I thought. Sure, what's up? Are you going to ask my mom to marry you? The directness shouldn't have surprised me by now, but it still caught me off guard. Would that be okay with you if I did? Are you kidding? I've been hoping you would for months. She's happier than I've ever seen her. Before you came along, she was just existing. Now she's actually living. Sincerity in her teenage voice nearly undid me. She means the world to me, Sophia. Both of you do, good, she said firmly. Because if you hurt her, Mrs. Patterson and I will hunt you down. I laughed, but I could see she was only half joking. I believe you. But you don't have to worry. About that, I know, she said, surprising me. I can tell you love her for real. Dad never looked at her the way you do. After everyone left, Alina and I found ourselves alone on her front porch, sitting on the swing that I'd installed last month. The evening air was perfect, warm enough to be comfortable, but cool enough to provide an excuse to sit close together. Thank you, Alina said softly. For what? For seeing me. For helping me remember who I was. For making me believe I could be someone worth loving. I turned to face her fully. Alina, you were always worth loving. You just forgot for a while. Maybe, she said, you reminded me. That day when you answered my question about being beautiful, about being seen, you gave me back a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. I thought about that day, about the courage it had taken for her to ask such a vulnerable question, about how much we'd both changed since then. Can I ask you something now? I said. Anything. I took her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in mine. Alina Morrison, would you marry me? Even though I'm a commitment-phobic handyman who's still figuring out how to be the man you deserve. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling the kind of smile that could light up the entire neighborhood. Marcus, I would marry you if you were a space alien from Mars. The answer is yes. Absolutely yes. As I kissed her under the porch light, with Mrs. Patterson probably watching from her window, and Sophia undoubtedly texting her friends about the engagement she'd been predicting for months. I realized that sometimes the most important repairs aren't the ones you make, to appliances or houses. Sometimes they're the ones you make to hearts and lives and the belief that everyone deserves to be truly seen and loved. Alina pulled back from the kiss, her eyes sparkling with mischief. So, do I get to keep my microwave repairman, or do I need to find a new one? Well, I said, grinning back at her, I happen to know someone who specializes in maintenance rather than repair. Prevention, remember? I plan to take very good care of what I've found here. Promise, for the rest of my life. And as we sat on that porch swing, planning our future and listening to the sounds of our neighborhood settling in for the night, I knew that the best things in life weren't the ones you set out to find. They were the ones that found you when you were brave enough to answer an unexpected question with complete honesty, and generous enough to see someone else's beauty even when they'd forgotten it themselves. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Let's click and check them out.